In the winter of 878, the King of England is hiding in a swamp, disguised as a peasant, alone in a stranger's hut, and he's just been screamed at by an old woman for letting her bread burn, because he was too busy staring at the fire to notice the smoke. The story that this actually happened may be more legend than record, but the man is real, and so is the collapse that put him there. His name is Alfred. 13 years earlier, he was one of 4 kings on this island. Now he's the last one left, and he's hiding from an army a fraction the size of the population it just conquered. Not because that army was unstoppable, because the 4 kingdoms it landed on hated each other more than they feared the sea. Real quick, before we continue, like this video, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Then tell me, do you think these 4 kingdoms could have stopped this if they'd worked together? For 70 years, this island has run on one grim, predictable rhythm. Ships appear on the horizon, bells ring, people grab whatever silver and children they can carry, and they run inland. The raiders land, they burn, they load their ships, and they leave before winter. It's brutal, but it's survivable, because it always ends. In the autumn of 865, ships appear off the coast of East Anglia, and everyone does exactly what 70 years of instinct has taught them. They brace for a storm that's supposed to pass. This time it doesn't. The men come ashore, and the first thing they ask for isn't gold. It's horses. To understand why that single request changes everything, forget the idea of England completely, because in 865 nobody on this island uses the word to mean a country. What actually exists is 4 separate kingdoms, and none of them particularly like the others. Northumbria in the north is currently tearing itself apart in a civil war between 2 rival kings. Mercia in the middle is the island's old heavyweight, past its prime but still dangerous. East Anglia in the east is smaller and richer, and it's the one that just met the ships. And Wessex in the south barely registers as a threat to anyone yet. Nobody's watching Wessex. That's the mistake. On an ordinary year, the greatest danger to a Northumbrian nobleman is another Northumbrian. That's the island this army has just landed on, for kingdoms with no shared identity and centuries of grudges between them, and the raiders are about to turn every single one of those grudges into a weapon. How many of them are there? Exactly. Here's where the story gets honest instead of tidy. Nobody knows for certain, not even close. The monks writing the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle never counted heads, they just called it the Missal here, the Great Army, great meaning enormous, not noble. For decades historians leaned towards small numbers, a few hundred fighting men at most, based on rough ship capacity math. Newer archaeology has pushed that estimate upward significantly, and we'll get to exactly why in a few minutes, because one dig site in particular changes the entire picture. The figure most commonly cited today lands around 3,000 warriors, though credible estimates still range anywhere from a few hundred to several thousand depending on the historian and the method. Take the number seriously. Don't take it as gospel. Either way, it's a rounding error against an island holding well over 1 million people. And they win anyway. The first reason is almost embarrassingly simple. They refuse to leave. Every Viking raid before this one runs on a clock, land in summer when the seas are calm, sail home before the winter storms make the crossing lethal. That rhythm is the entire reason England has survived 70 years of raiding. You only ever had to outlast a season. This army breaks the clock entirely. When winter closes in, they dig in on East Anglian soil instead of sailing home, and the East Anglians, desperate to avoid a fight, buy peace with supplies and horses. That single word, horses, quietly rewires the entire war. A Viking force on foot moves like any army. Slow, predictable, easy to see coming. The same force on horseback becomes something this island has no answer for, not cavalry charges, just speed, ride to a target, dismount, fight on foot, vanish again before the FYRD, the local part-time levy of farmers, can even be pulled off its fields in time. East Anglia thinks it's buying safety. It's actually handing a mounted strike force the keys to the whole island. With that speed unlocked, the army turns north toward the one kingdom already busy destroying itself. Northumbria in 866 is practically an open door. Two rival kings, two competing courts, both watching each other instead of the coast. In November, the Great Army takes York, and it takes it on All Saints' Day specifically, a morning when a Christian kingdom's leaders are supposed to be inside a church, not on the walls. It isn't until the following March that Northumbria's warring kings finally set aside their feud and attack together to retake the city. Too late. It's a slaughter. Both kings die in the same afternoon, and an entire royal line ends in a single battle. Here the pattern that defines this whole invasion becomes clear for the first time. The army doesn't try to occupy Northumbria. It doesn't have the numbers, and it knows it. Instead, it finds a compliant Englishman named Egbert, sits him on the throne, and lets him rule exactly as long as he keeps paying and keeps the kingdom quiet. Why hold a country when you can just own its king instead? Mercia sees them coming next, and for one brief moment, the island does the thing that should have worked from the start. Two kingdoms unite. Mercia's king sends for Wessex, and Wessex answers, sending an army north under its king Alfred and his younger brother, a man named Alfred. Together they trap the invaders inside the town of Nottingham. And then nothing happens. The Great Army simply refuses to come out from behind the walls. The siege drags on with no way to force the issue, and as winter approaches, Mercia does what every kingdom in this story eventually does. It pays. Silver changes hands. The invaders leave. The fragile alliance quietly dissolves and goes home. The pattern repeats, and more importantly, the army notices it repeating. Every time England is offered a choice between fighting and paying, it pays, and every payment teaches the same lesson. These kingdoms will always choose the danger they can postpone over the one in front of them. East Anglia is next to actually fall, and its king, a man named Edmund, is the rare figure in this story who chooses to fight instead of pay. He loses, and he dies. The earliest surviving account is brutally short. The army took winter quarters, killed the king, and conquered the land. The far more famous version, Edmund tied to a tree and shot full of arrows before being beheaded, gets written down over a century later, by a monk building the legend of a martyred saint. It might be true. It might not be. What's certain is plainer and harder. The king stood, the king fell, and East Anglia had no one left to lead it. 3 kingdoms down in under a decade, and only Wessex remains, and Wessex does not fold quietly. The year 871 alone sees 9 battles in 12 months, including a real West Saxon victory at a place called Ashdown, where Alfred himself helps break a Viking force and send it running. For one moment, it genuinely looks like someone has finally found the answer. They haven't, because the arithmetic of this war has never been equal. When Wessex wins a battle, it kills some raiders and the army simply falls back to regroup. When the Great Army wins a battle, an entire kingdom ends. Wessex has to win every single time. The invaders only ever have to win once. By April, Athelred is dead from wounds or exhaustion the record won't specify, and his younger brother inherits a crown he might not survive wearing. Alfred does the only thing left available to him. He pays them to leave. It buys time. It doesn't buy safety. While Wessex catches its breath, the ground itself starts giving up evidence that rewrites what this army actually was. In the winter of 872, the invaders camp at a place called Torksey on the River Trent, and when archaeologists eventually mapped what they left behind, the site covered roughly 26 hectares. That's not a war camp. That's a small temporary town, complete with metalworkers, traders, gaming pieces, and hundreds of coins and weights. This army didn't only fight. It did business, repaired its own gear, melted down plunder, and waited out the winter in something closer to a functioning settlement than a military bivouac. A site that size doesn't hold a few hundred men, and Torksey is one of the biggest reasons historians started revising the old low estimates upward. The following winter gets darker. At Repton in Derbyshire, archaeologists uncover a burial mound packed with the jumbled remains of at least 264 people, roughly 80% of them men between 18 and 45, fighting age. For years the dates on those bones seemed inexplicably wrong, decades off from where they should sit, until researchers realized the error wasn't in the bones, it was in the assumption behind the dating method. These people ate enormous amounts of seafood, which throws off standard radiocarbon results in a very specific, correctable way. Once researchers adjusted for that, the dates lined up perfectly with the winter the chronicle places the army there. You're not looking at a legend or a rounded-up number in an old manuscript. You're looking at the army itself, or the people who marched beside it. While camped at Repton, the invaders finish Mercia. Its king simply gives up his throne and flees the country entirely, dying in exile in Rome. No battle, no siege. He just leaves. Once again the army installs a compliant local ruler, a man named Ceolwulf, to hold the kingdom for them, though later historians increasingly suspect Ceolwulf had more genuine authority and legitimacy than the hostile chronicle accounts, written by his enemies, ever gave him credit for. 3 kingdoms conquered or collared in under 10 years, and in 875 the Great Army does something that proves just how completely it has already won. It splits in 2. You only divide a winning force once you've stopped being afraid of losing. One half rides north and, for the first time in this entire story, stops taking crowns and starts taking farmland instead. The raiders become landlords. It's the earliest seed of what history will call the Danelaw. The other half turns toward the one kingdom that bought its way out instead of dying, and for 2 years it probes Wessex's edges, looking for the weak point. It finds one in January of 878, using the exact same move this whole invasion opened with all those years ago. Surprise, in the dead of winter, when no medieval army is supposed to be anywhere near a battlefield. The invaders strike Alfred's court at Chippenham while it's wintering completely unprepared. Alfred escapes, not as a king with an army, but as a fugitive with a handful of followers, fleeing into the marshes of Somerset to a scrap of high ground called Athelney. 13 years earlier, 4 kingdoms ruled this island. Now 3 are gone, and the last king of the last one is hiding in a swamp with almost nothing left. By every reasonable measure, this story should end right here, with an island fully divided between conquerors and puppets. It doesn't. Through that winter and into spring, Alfred rebuilds something out of almost nothing, gathering fighters from Somerset and neighboring shires, and in May of 878 he meets Guthrum's army at the Battle of Edington and breaks it, decisively, for the first time in this entire war. Guthrum doesn't just retreat. He surrenders, converts to Christianity as part of the peace that follows, and agrees to a treaty that finally draws a line on the map, Wessex on one side, Danish-ruled territory on the other. It's the first time in 13 years this island has had a border instead of a battlefield. That line matters more than it looks like it should, because it's the first moment anyone on this island starts thinking of the lands south and west of it as one single thing worth defending together, rather than 4 rival kingdoms waiting to be picked off one at a time. The idea of England doesn't exist in 865. By 878, in a swamp in Somerset, it's just been born. Stories like this one, kingdoms that shouldn't have fallen, and the one moment that turns everything around, are exactly what this channel is built on. If that's the kind of history you want more of, subscribe now so you don't miss the next one.